Building Brands podcast is dedicated to exploring the journeys of industry leaders who have successfully built a brand. Join Building Brands Marketing, a marketing agency that has successfully scaled multiple brands, as we dive deep into the strategies, challenges, and insights that have shaped the success of industry leaders and provide you with the resources you need to do the same. Building Brands Marketing is a full-service marketing agency specializing in crafting customized marketing strategies for service-based businesses with the creative powerhouse to drive real results. Welcome to the Building Brands Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Building Brands Podcast. My name is Braden Popp, the host of today's episode in the Policy and Profit series. And today on the show, I am happy to welcome Joey Katz, who is with Raintree Group out of Oklahoma City. Joey, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Braden. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to jump into our conversation. And the place I want to start is back when Raintree started. Can you talk about, your journey into insurance, how you started with farmers, and then ultimately how you found yourself, with your own agency and kind of growing and learning in that realm of the insurance world?
Sure. So prior to insurance, I had graduated from college and was working in the nonprofit sector as a program director for the YMCA here in Oklahoma City, and was building their programs, and things were going really well, and started to work on my master's and was doing some training nationally for the Y, and thought that I was headed in the right direction. My wife had opened up a business here locally, and I went to the CEO of the association I worked with and said, hey, I'd like to move up. I'm checking all these boxes. I've done all these things. And he smiled and said, okay, well, you need to move out of state for at least 3 or 4 years, go somewhere else, work for a different association, and then come back. And I thought, well, I'm not going to do that. Like, it's not, my through here, my wife has a business here. I could go do about anything else and make as much money as I'm making. And so I started to look around. I had toyed with the idea of insurance. Part of my role in that job was risk management. And so I interviewed and talked with a couple different companies, had used farmers as a consumer since I was 16, and started with them and went through their career agent training, started my agency in Norman, just south of Oklahoma City here, and went through and hit a lot of milestones with them. We were a Topper Club agency. We did championship. We hit lots of achievement clubs. And then I started to notice a change in the direction, it felt like. And so I wasn't sure if it was still going to be a fit, and they rolled out a couple of new programs, and we went through those, and we acquired an agency through their agency acquisition program, and it just didn't feel like my heart was in it really. And so I needed kind of a change of scenery. And so in 2014, I started to work with a business coach. And one of the first things he said was, what are you going to do if Farmers comes to you and says, hey, you can't sell home insurance in Oklahoma anymore? That's a viable possibility. There's storms, there's wildfires, there's all these things. Well, what would you do if that happened? And I said, well, I don't know. And he encouraged me to basically to open up a second entity that would do things that farmers didn't do, things like group health and those kind of things. And so that's how Raintree started. That was going to be the idea. I went to farmers, I told them what I was going to do. They said, yeah, this is great, signed off on it. And down the road we went. And in about 2016, 2017, some changes came to how they were going to compensate producers and agents. And then I had a pretty bad claims experience with one of my clients, and they were able to go to an independent brokerage and get much better coverage for way less money. And I was kind of floored. And I started to talk to contractors and people who worked directly with these independent carriers to see, what was your experience and what did it look like? are they good? Are they different? What am I getting into? And then I started to talk to actual carriers and aggregators and all these things. And in I guess April 30th of 2018 was my last day with Farmers, and May 1st of 2018, Raintree officially opened as an independent agency.
Oh
And at
wow.
that point, it was just me and one CSR, and we hit the ground running. And we operated like that for probably 6 months or so, and
Hmm.
then yeah, it went to just me, and then I started to add some staff. I had some friends that were farmers agents that started to reach out and ask me about what it looked like really on the independent side, and they started to move over to us in late 2019 or so, and we went from there.
So that's really interesting. So at one point you cut off from farmers completely, and that's the point when you started your independent agency. So you were really kind of taking a leap there. Can you talk about what that leap was like, and ultimately like how did you like what challenges did you face? How did you overcome those challenges, especially early on?
So the leap was, I don't really know. Looking back, I'm thinking, man, what were you doing? Like I had two young kids, I had a house, we had all these things that I was responsible for, and I was just like, no, we got it, we're good. I'm thankful that I did think that way, because it's
Mhm.
worked out wonderfully. But I walked away from an agency where I knew about what I was, I knew I was going to make a good little bit of money every month, and life was going to be fine, and it wasn't hard. I used to joke with my friends, well, life doesn't suck, it's okay. Um, and I made that transition. And one thing that I didn't know was, when I sold my agency back to farmers basically for contract value is what it's called. And so they pay you 3 installments, and the first installment comes. I made an assumption it would come pretty quickly. It doesn't. It's like 45
Oh
days or
wow.
so. Well, so you don't get any commission for 45 days.
Wow.
I didn't get anything from the new agency for almost 2 months because I hadn't sold anything. There wasn't anything coming in. And so that was the first challenge. Was I had saved some up, but you realize like it's going to be a good bit before we see any actual money. Um, and so being able to get used to one of the biggest challenges in the beginning to me going from a captive carrier to independent was the the different time frames of when companies paid. That was really challenging to manage because I like to know, like, okay, if these policies issue by this time, we should get paid on them. Uh, we figured that out pretty quickly. That wasn't super difficult. But then you start to go into, well, all of the technology is different. As a captive, if you're an agent with one carrier, typically that carrier provides you with all the technology you need. It's all right there in one neat little box. Well, I started off, I had easy links to rate, easy links to manage it. I used a separate calendar app. I had all these different bits of technology that we had to bring together and try and get to work. And that was a little challenging. And then it was, okay, what are we going to do for leads? I had been a farmer's agent for 15 years with the same phone number in the same location, basically in the community where I grew up, where, my family had lived for 50 something years, uh, to I got a new phone number. Nobody knows what
Yeah.
Raintree is. I have no real social media following. I don't, I didn't, some parts of my transition I planned really well, and other parts didn't even occur to me to manage or to think about. And so, the challenges in the beginning were figuring out a steady stream of income. Where are we going to get our leads from? Because in the beginning, I thought, well, I'm going to write everybody. I'm an independent agent. Everybody's going to be who I want to go after.
Right.
And learned that that's not the case. We've become kind of picky in what we do, but it took me a while to learn that.
Right.
And so, the challenges in the beginning were things you'd expect: financial, actual management, and strategy, and then staff. We got to a point where we were really busy in the beginning, and then it kind of died off, and I had to let staff go. And so now I'm back to being a one man show. It's like I moved back in time 10 years, and then we started to put some pieces together, and we took off at that point, and then that brought on a whole new set of challenges. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to dive into what you said, like, oh man, it's a couple months into my agency. I need to figure out how to find leads.
right.
That's a huge. That's probably like the biggest question and that you have whenever you start your own agency. Like, is there going to be enough people that I'm able to sell to support my family, to grow the business, and all of that's in the back of your mind. So looking back now that it's been, um, as many years as it's been, how did you go about finding those leads? Like what was the most effective things that you did to build your portfolio?
Um, so I like to say I want a shotgun approach with sniper focus. Okay. And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is in the beginning, I literally, like I said, I wanted everybody. And I quickly
Hmm.
learned that by doing that, I was really decreasing the value of my marketing money and the power of it. And so I started to focus on, my wife, I remember, I don't even remember what the marketing idea was. It was something that I'd come up with, and she's like, well, how would you reply? How would you respond to that? If this came to you, what would you do? And I said, I'd throw it away. And she's like, well, don't you want people like you? Don't you want people that own houses and own businesses? And I was like, yeah. She's like, why would you do that? Okay, it's a great point. And so we instead of going the conventional route of what I had been taught through farmers, we started to do things like Facebook marketing and some giveaways.
Yeah.
Um, we did some community events where it wasn't tied to, hey, here's a farmer's pamphlet and a piece of bubble gum. Thanks, come back. We did things where we were just involved to be involved.
Right.
You know, we I'm trying to think. Let's see. We did events, and the events got me the opportunity to talk to people. Okay.
Right.
And so what I had to get really good at was, and it sounds cliche, but the 30-second elevator speech.
Hmm.
You introduced us as Rain Tree Group, and that's our trade name, and that's what we use, and that's our email, and all those things. But the legal name of the business, because I thought I was super smart, is Rain Tree Asset Management Group.
Yeah.
And I did that in the beginning because it spurns a question. People hear that and they go, "What's an asset management group? I don't even know what that means." Well, that opened the
Hmm.
door, and I did not do it on purpose, but I was like, "Oh, this was a nice, happy little accident." It opened the door to answer those questions. And if all I did was answer questions, well, they learned something, but they didn't give me any information. I don't know anything about them. And so to me, one of the most important things in getting leads is being able to ask questions.
Yeah.
What do you do? Where are you from? Just general conversation questions. And I mean, in the beginning, literally, I would write them down. If I didn't have a note card with me, I would write them down to remember, like, hey, here's the flow of conversation that I want with people. And it got to be such that it was just natural, and I no longer needed that note card. And we took that, and then we turned that into, okay, we're gonna transition that over into our quote sheets and those kind of things, so that everything felt like a conversation. To get back to the lead part, so we would we did some of the natural, we'd send out postcards with people around X states that we knew, and
Right.
in order to do that, one of the things that I have done in the past is you get a data, you buy a list of mortgages that were closed in a certain month, or those kind of things. And those work, but those work to an extent, but those are needles in a haystack if you're just doing them one time.
Right.
And so in working with the business coach, one of the things that he's taught me is to be able to, you track what you do. And that way, if it works, you can repeat it, and if it sucks, you can get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so we would track this, and I know, okay, if I want to sell, one of the things that when we talk to agents is, okay, if you tell me what your number is, how much money do you want to make per month? Well, we know what our average commission is off of our average policy. We can work backwards from there to tell you this is how many leads you need per week. And so I started to track those kind of things, and we would get them, like I said, through Facebook ads. I was in every community group that I could think of, and I would search for insurance every day at the beginning of the day. Type in
Yeah.
insurance, search it, and if somebody talked about it, I would go and answer the question. And I wouldn't be like, "Hey, I can help you with a quote." I would just answer the question. I wanted to be seen as an expert or somebody that people turn to. Um, and in the beginning, that paid $0. That there was nothing that came from that. But now it's gotten us to the point where people do turn to Raintree and to me and to my agents and my
Yeah.
staff for those questions. And when they do that, that builds on itself because now they're out there telling your story. They're out there selling for you. Like, oh, my guy's got, my guy, my gal, they've got that answer. They do it. They've always been able to help us. And so I think that marketing is the lifeblood of any sales organization, but being able to consistently interact with your clients and prospects and do what you say is the biggest part. Getting it'd be like going fishing and you get a bite, but you don't have any way to get them in. You just, oh well, that was cool, that worked. We got people interested, and there was a lot of that in the beginning. A lot of this ad worked. I got 14 clicks, in the first
Right.
2 hours, but nobody filled out the form. Why not? Oh well, that's because the form's 37 questions. We need to pare that down. Just a lot of trial and error stuff.
No,
But
absolutely.
you've got to meet your clients where they are and how they want to interact.
Absolutely. And I think also doing everything with intentionality. Like if you do a direct mail campaign or if you do a social media ad, it needs to be very clear what your objective is and what your intent is
Exactly.
for the user, the end user. Like what do you want them to do?
Right.
Oftentimes people will send out a direct mailer and expect all these phone calls back. But the direct mail just said, "Hey, we're a sushi shop on this street. Come visit us." And it
Right.
wasn't clear, like there wasn't an offer that you wanted people to take that you could
Right.
track and see how many people utilize this offer, or there
Right.
wasn't a specific call to action, a QR code for people to scan. So you can't really track the effectiveness of that. As much as you would like, right? And so it's so critical whenever you're implementing a tactic to have that specific objective and specific, what is the thing that's I'm going to say, okay, this was a successful tactic for me.
Right.
And it sounds like you kind of had that same approach as well. Like in the past, you've been tracking, okay, I ran this Facebook ad campaign, I got this many clicks from it. This successful or not? Was it profitable or not? Do I want to keep doing this?
Right.
So I guess how do you identify what tactics work well? Maybe some things that you need to improve on, or things that you should change. You mentioned like, oh, well, a form I had attached to this ad was 37 questions long. Maybe that was the reason people didn't fill it out. How do you kind of monitor those things?
So we look at we've got a couple of different apps and pieces of technology that we use to track, or not even to track, to collect information. Okay.
Hmm.
Um, and those different forms we can tag different ways, and we can have them come into our CRM and get tagged. And um, those tags literally, I mean, just like what it sounds like, it tells us like, okay, this came from this ad, or this came from
Right.
this producer at this event. And we can do that through QR codes. We can do it with links. We can, there's lots of different modes to do it. The biggest thing to me is being able to tie it with as much data as you can get. Data to me
Yes.
is the most important thing. If I know that we got this lead from John Doe on September 1st at 8:30 at night. Okay, well that's data, but I don't know anything else. But if I know that John Doe filled that ad out, or filled that form out after seeing our ad for the third time, on the same platform. Okay, well that's real data that I can use. That's quantifiable, and I know. Um, being able to do that allows us to continually evolve and create marketing pieces and uh, customer interactions that drive things towards that call to action. I mean, that's one of the things that one of the first things I learned was if you don't have a call to action, people, they don't know what to do.
Mhm.
They just don't. And that's one of the first things we improved. I was talking about postcards. I sent out a postcard and it would just say, like, hey, we're insuring homes in your area for $250,000 for $1,100 a year. Okay, cool. That's great that you're doing that. I don't know anything else about you. And so we change,
Yeah.
we would change that, like click, scan this code, or, call this
Right.
number to get your quote. Um, just giving people, just steering them that next step helps. Um, we, I think I said earlier, I like technology. I like things that make life as easy as possible for me and my staff and my producers. And so we've used all kinds of different technology, sometimes to a fault. My staff thinks that I just kind of jump around. Sometimes I'm like, no, I promise I've looked at this for, a few months. I've tried it on the back end. And so I think one of the things that agents fall into is they try and do so many things to market or to get people, or I'm gonna use this bit of technology for this and this bit for that. And really and truly, you need to focus on one or two items in the beginning, get really proficient with those, and then move forward with something else. It's really difficult if you try five things at once and you have success. Well, you don't know which one of those five it was. But if you're doing one or two things and you've got some check marks in there to be able to track where it came from and be able to repeat it or tweak it, that helps.
Absolutely. What are some of the technologies that you found most useful for you as you're growing? What are some of the specific areas that you've seen it help?
One of the biggest things, and this sounds, we, let's see, probably a year and a half ago, um, one of my agents really started to focus on his Google reviews. I mean,
Hmm.
that was his absolute, I'm going to do this. Everyone I talk to, I'm going to ask for a Google review. And the idea is that would drive up his Google ranking, and it would in turn, he would start to get calls and leads from that. And he did. I mean, he went after it. And he's now, I think, the top in like two or three cities around where he's at. I won't say where he's at so people don't go Google him, but
Yeah.
he does really, I mean, he gets anywhere between 40 and I think 85 leads a month just from
Yeah.
Google. Uh, and so one thing that we did that is super easy is we've got an onboarding campaign that we put our new clients on. I mean, it's simple.
Yeah.
You literally in our CRM, if you click sold and yes, they're going to start to get emails and text messages depending on their preference. And one of the very first ones is, would you mind giving us a Google review with a link? And I know it's steering, and I know that they don't all stick, but we get somewhere between 4 and 7 reviews every month just from that, not from anything else, just from that
Right.
simple text message. Uh, and then when you factor in the follow-ups and things that technology does, uh, that first year, our clients get, I believe it's 15 touches from us in emails and text messages. And some of those are exactly what you'd expect. Hey, did you know we sell life insurance? Did you know that in the spring, the most common cause of loss is hail and is wind and hail. How are you prepared? Here's a checklist. Uh, but then some things that we've done that clients seem to like is we've got a built-in renewal checklist, and it's simple. It's literally like, hey, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Is this still your right
Right.
email? Has anything changed? Have you made any home improvements? Have you changed your driving habits? Those questions, that starts a conversation.
Right.
We've got a very similar one that goes out to our commercial clients. And it allows us to make sure that, something's happened that we don't miss, and that that renewal piece, it slowed down a little bit in in responses, but it's because we've had it for over a year now and people are used to seeing it. So we need to probably change up the delivery of it. But for an agent, most of my agents are getting 2 or 3 cross-sell opportunities a week from that, just from that piece. You
Great.
know, the Smith family forgot to mention that they have 2 ATVs that, they just keep on their property down at the lake. Well, okay, do you want those insured? I mean, it that questionnaire kind of leads those people to let us know what other exposures they may have that they're not thinking about. So,
I think the thing I like most about it is that it's automated, right? Like you don't
exactly,
have
yeah,
to like
I
manually
have
send all of this out. Yeah.
I have the best intentions in the world, but life happens. You get busy, you're caught up in something, and you forget to hit send, and that automation takes that away. That's the when we launched that. I remember because I had been using the CRM. We'd been using it for about 4 or 5 weeks, while all of the scripts were and everything were built out on the back end, and uh, they hit go, and I came in the next day to like I think it was 111 text messages or something and I was like, "Oh, well, that's different. Okay."
There you
Um,
go.
and it was, we, in all honesty, we hit go to everybody instead of spacing it out over a year to,
Yeah.
on a certain carrier, but that's okay. Um, and so it's been having things automated allows them to be consistent, and I think consistency is one of the biggest markers of how successful anything's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's dive into that. Like consistency is everything. I think not only for your clients, but for your employees, for everyone who's associated with your organization. If you have a consistent process, as a consistent method, a consistent message, consistency in everything that you do, you're going to find yourself more successful. That's kind of just a general rule of thumb, right? Be
Right.
consistent.
Right.
Do what you tell you're gonna do. Tell people that you're gonna do, right?
Exactly.
So, can you talk about how important consistency is to your organization and especially in the processes and systems that you implement?
I would say that if it's not the most important thing, it is a close number two. Um, because if you don't repeat actions, you're not going to see the same thing.
Hmm.
Repeatability is paramount, I think, in anything that you do. Um, and I went for a long time with no real direction on who my ideal client was. Okay. And my business coach challenged me. He's like, "Share, ask your staff who's our ideal client." He goes, "If you ask 10 of them, you're going to get 10 different answers." And we did. I mean, that was it. They varied, and so we started with that. Okay, here's what we're looking for. It doesn't mean we're not going to write other pieces of business or other clients, but here's where I want to be really focused. I want to do this, and if we do this, it's the whole thing. You go out and you buy a new truck and you see everybody has new trucks, or I mean, it's just that thing. You find what you're looking for. And so being consistent about knowing, okay, we want people that own homes, have 2 cars, and own a business or work, and work in management of some type, because those people are going to tend to have more lines of business that we can help and we can help them with. That lines up with our carriers. It flows very well. So that was the first thing. Then coming in and I am great at ideas. I am not always the dot the I, cross the T kind of guy. So one of my very first hires was somebody who is super dot the I, cross the T's. And she helped us develop a a process for how we're going to close business. So, when a producer sells a policy, they do this, the processor does this, this is how it goes out to the client. Uh, and in doing that, then we created, okay, here's our carrier information notebook, and it has, all the contacts and it gives us a space to go to find everything that we would need. And it allows all of our producers and staff to have the same information in front of them just right there at their fingertips. Then you get into, to me, consistency goes further even into like, okay, even on days that I don't want to do it, I'm gonna do it. If I know that I need to call 5 commercial leads every day in this specific sector. And here's what I'm going to do. I've got to do that. If I take a day off, well, that doesn't really hurt me today because I did the work 90 days ago or 30 days ago, whatever your timeline is, but that's going to hurt me in the future. And if you stay consistent and you just do those things, then there shouldn't be any change in lead flow and production. And, you
Right.
know, for so long, I would shield myself from the ebbs and flows of the business, be like, well, it's slow this time of year. Kids have gone back to school, or it's Christmas, or well, I have enough data now, and I've got enough experience with salespeople to know that when that's the case, typically it's because you did something, again, whatever your time like your cell life cycle is, you did something at some point to throw that off. My producers that are consistent every day with their activity, their production is consistent. And I think that that's one of the key elements that I know for me, when I would have a good month, or, we'd get back from a achievement club, I'd pat myself on the back, man, I did really good. And I call it a victory lap. You take a few days off, you don't really take them off, but you're not giving it your all. Well, 30 or 45 days down the road, you're like, crap, I don't have any leads. Well, you don't have any leads because you didn't
Yeah.
work 30 or 45 days ago like you should have. Uh, and so, we call it moving a grain of sand. If I said, okay, Braden, I need you to go build me a beach, go knock it out. Well, that's a
Yeah.
big job. People, they get lost in it. Oh, that's so much work. But if I said, hey, every time you walk past this bucket, grab some sand and drop it over there on your way out the door. Well, eventually
Yeah.
you have a beach. And, being able to do it and think of it that way, and breaking it down just into small little pieces, that makes it a lot more digestible, and it doesn't seem so daunting. So,
Absolutely. I think that makes perfect sense. Uh, I do want to shift gears a little bit
sure.
to kind of close out our conversation. So you've had success with your agency. You've built it successfully. You're growing in the Oklahoma City area and Tulsa, expanding beyond the state. At this point, you're looking to expand to new locations. Tell us a little bit about what that process has been like. What you're hoping to how you're hoping to achieve that goal, and what's your strategy to expand the business.
So, the process has been kind of slow. I mean, that's
Mm,
in the beginning when I started in 2018. It was kind of it was not kind of it wasn't nearly as difficult to get appointed in different states and do those things as a property and casualty agency. You could simply get your license, tell a carrier,
yeah.
hey, I want to do this, and most of them were like, yeah, great, that sounds wonderful, best of luck, let us know if we can help. And then the market turned, and it became very difficult to get those appointments or keep them. Uh, and so we focused on Oklahoma, and we've done a really good job in Oklahoma. And one of my agents he knows that I have this vision of taking Raintree outside of Oklahoma. And so we've talked about it, and we've, bounced ideas off each other back and forth. And he's got a very good referral source that is in other states and has asked us to expand into those states. And so I started to have conversations with carriers who were probably going on 8 or 9 months ago. Um, and those conversations in the beginning were, nope, not a chance. Sorry, it's not going to work. And consistency, I would just bring it up every time I saw them. Hey, anything changed? What can we do
Right.
to get in there? Here's what we're missing out on. And I started to bring them data, and hey, we have this many opportunities in your state that we're missing. And here's how we close them here. Here's our ratios here. I don't think it'd be any different there. Um, and through that and building a relationship with carrier reps, some doors have started to open. And so we're going to take the processes that we have in place, and we're going to partner with um, the referral source, like I said, and that's going to be that's getting us a nice lead flow in the beginning.
Yeah.
But in doing that, we've also met some some other service providers and professionals who are wanting to offer property and casualty insurance to their clients and their book of business,
Right.
but they don't have the experience. They're not going to get an appointment, but they have a lot of really good opportunities. And uh, just through networking and knowing people, we've been introduced to them. And so we're gonna partner with a group in a state on the East Coast, and then a few states coming back from that to help work their book of business and offer them what Raintree's done here as far as being able to typically provide a solution that uh, exceeds what the client is expecting as far as coverage and premium and service and all those things. So I'm excited about that. It's, when I started 7, 8 years ago, I wouldn't have ever thought, hey, this is where we would be. It was a goal. I
Right.
still literally have a hand drawn organizational chart of what I wanted Raintree to be, and we've done that, and now we're building off of that, and so uh, I'm excited to get into these other markets and see what there is to learn there. See if what we've done translates, you know, without a hitch, or if there's going to be some challenges and some things that we've got to learn and uh, and work backwards from for there. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's very exciting. I think it's cool also that you have that aspiration for growth. I know, uh, like for me as a young professional in marketing, for example, um, I always want to surround myself with people who are looking forward and looking to expand their skill sets, grow their organization, or just serve the community in different ways. And so I love talking to people like you who's like, man, I've done great in Oklahoma City. I'm not done yet. I want to share and spread this force that I've built and share it with the rest of the community, the country, ultimately with that long-term goal. So I love talking to people like you. So I appreciate your time, and I appreciate all of your wisdom and insight into all the challenges you faced and how you've overcome them throughout the year. So really appreciate it, Joey. Last question: where can people find you online? How can people get in touch with you or get in touch with your business?
sure. So our website is pretty straightforward. Just excuse me, raintreegroups.com. Um, my email is just my first name at raintreegroups.com. Make sure to put the S on there. There is another entity that doesn't have the S in their website or their emails. We're on Facebook. I'm really trying to get back into having a presence on Instagram and TikTok, and I've got some people that are helping me with that. But those are the
Yeah.
easiest way to get a hold of us, and I'm happy to answer questions. Like you said, I love to surround myself with people that are looking forward. I firmly believe that you become the product of the people you surround yourself with. So
Yeah.
I try to make sure that everybody in my boat's all facing the same direction and rowing the same way. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joey. Again, appreciate it, and thank you for coming on the show.
thank you, sir.